I sat at the long mahogany table, my fingers lightly tapping against the polished surface as I watched my wife, Camille, smirk while handing me the coffee pot. The way she did it, so casual, so dismissive, as if I were nothing more than a servant in my own marriage, made my stomach twist. "Just pour the coffee, dear, and sit at the back," she said, her tone laced with condescension. A soft chuckle rippled through the room, blending seamlessly with the clinking of crystal glasses and the rustle of fine linen napkins. Camille's family, a self-important pack of corporate elites, barely acknowledged my presence. They were too wrapped up in their own world, too certain of their own superiority. At the head of the table sat Gerald, Camille's father, his silver hair combed back with meticulous precision, his dark suit tailored to perfection. He was a man who spoke in boardroom strategies and acquisition numbers, whose approval I had never truly earned. Beside him, Lorraine, Camille's mother, dabbed at the corner of her mouth with a napkin, her diamond bracelet catching the warm glow of the chandelier. She had always looked at me with thinly veiled disdain, as if Camille had married beneath her station. Then there was Lucas, Camille's older brother, the golden child, the one set to inherit the empire. He barely spared me a glance, too busy scrolling through his phone, checking stock prices or emails, whatever held more importance than the man married to his sister. 5 years of this. 5 years of carefully measured words, of swallowing my pride in the name of harmony. I had played my role well, the accommodating husband, the one who stayed in the background while his wife's family ran the show. But tonight, everything was about to change. I glanced at my watch, a subtle smirk curling at the corner of my lips. They had no idea. Their world was about to shift in ways they never imagined. The conversation carried on without me. Something about a major acquisition, a crucial business deal they were on the verge of closing. Their voices buzzed around me, filled with strategies and self-assured confidence. I listened, not out of interest, but because I enjoyed the irony of it all. Then, the doors to the dining hall swung open. The room quieted slightly as a sharply dressed man strode in, his presence commanding immediate attention. Richard Connors, the CEO of the very company they were desperate to strike a deal with, walked in with the air of a man who knew his importance. The moment his eyes landed on me, however, he froze. The shift was subtle at first, a flicker of recognition passing through his features, but then it solidified into something sharper. Shock, maybe even disbelief. His hesitation did not go unnoticed. Camille's family watched him closely, their poised expressions barely masking their curiosity. "Aren't you the owner of?" Richard began, his voice trailing off as the realization dawned on him fully. A sharp, unnatural silence fell over the room. Lorraine's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering against the marble floor. It was almost poetic. All eyes turned to me. I set the coffee pot down gently, the sound of porcelain meeting with the only thing breaking the suffocating silence. Camille's smirk had vanished, replaced by something far less certain. Gerald cleared his throat, his grip tightening around his fork. "There must be some mistake," he said carefully, his voice strained. "This is just my son-in-law. He doesn't own anything." But Richard wasn't looking at Gerald anymore. He was looking at me. And suddenly, I had their full attention. I leaned back in my chair, slow, measured, savoring the moment. They had always dismissed me, overlooked me, treated me like an afterthought. But now, for the first time, they were beginning to understand. The ground beneath their feet was shifting, and they were about to learn exactly who they had underestimated. The silence was thick, suffocating, like the eye of a storm that had yet to unleash its full force. I could feel the weight of every gaze at that long mahogany table, each pair of eyes darting between me and Richard Connors, the CEO of the company Camille's family had been desperately trying to impress. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just let the tension stretch out, let them sit in the uncertainty, let them stew in the first shreds of doubt. Camille was the first to crack. Her smirk had disappeared, her fingers curling into fists against the crisp white linen of the tablecloth. Her face had paled, her lips parting as she searched for something, anything, to say. Gerald, ever the businessman, forced a tight chuckle, straightening his posture as he turned to Richard. "You must be mistaken," he said, his voice attempting its usual command, though there was a faint waver to it. "This is just my son-in-law. He doesn't own anything." Richard didn't look convinced. His sharp gaze flicked back to me, his brow furrowed. You didn't tell them, did you? I exhaled slowly, letting a smirk of my own take form as I leaned forward, finally engaging. I placed my elbows on the table, clasping my hands together. Tell them what? I asked, my voice carrying just enough amusement to send a ripple of unease through the room. Camille sat up straighter, her chair scraping against the floor as she turned to me, her eyes dark with suspicion. What is he talking about? I didn't answer. Not yet. I wanted to enjoy this. Richard smirked then, shaking his head slightly, as if he were marveling at the absurdity of the situation. He turned toward Camille's family, his expression unreadable, but his voice firm. That your husband, he said, nodding toward me, owns Wolf Industries. The very company that's been silently acquiring shares in your family's business for the last 6 months. The air was sucked out of the room. Lorraine's breath hitched audibly, her hand instinctively clutching her pearl necklace as if it could anchor her in place. Gerald's face contorted, his fingers tightening around the arms of his chair, his knuckles turning white. Lucas, who had been lazily scrolling through his phone just minutes ago, suddenly went rigid. His phone dropped onto the table with a dull thud. Camille's reaction, however, was the most satisfying. She stared at me, blinking as if trying to process the words she had just heard, her lips trembling slightly before she could regain control. That's not possible, she whispered, shaking her head, more to herself than anyone else. That's not possible. But it was. And they all knew it. I took my time before responding, savoring their unraveling. Then, finally, I leaned back in my chair, stretching out my legs as I picked up my coffee cup, taking a slow sip before placing it back down. Technically, I said, my voice casual, not yet. But as of today, Wolf Industries owns 48% of your stock. Gerald inhaled sharply. Lucas's jaw clenched. I came here to finalize the deal for the remaining 52%. It was Lucas who finally broke the paralysis gripping the room. He surged forward, grabbing the documents Richard had slid onto the table and flipping through the pages frantically. His hands shook as he scanned them, his breathing uneven. This, he trailed off, his fingers tightening around the pages before he looked up at me, his face contorted in disbelief. This can't be right. Oh, but it is, Richard supplied helpfully. Lorraine swallowed hard, her perfectly curated poise beginning to crack. This has to be some kind of mistake, she muttered, shaking her head in disbelief. There's no way he could have done this without us knowing. I tilted my head, feigning curiosity. You sure about that? Camille was still looking at me, but now the shock was giving way to something darker, betrayal, anger, humiliation all clashing together in her gaze. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. You've been spying on us, she accused, her voice sharp with rage. Using me? I met her glare without flinching. My voice, when I spoke, was calm, measured. No, Camille, I said smoothly. I've been protecting your employees from your family's incompetence. The blow landed exactly as I had intended. Camille recoiled slightly, as if I had physically struck her. Lucas sucked in a sharp breath, his face turning red with anger. Gerald's nostrils flared. Richard chuckled under his breath, shaking his head as he reached for his glass of scotch. Damn, he murmured. This is even better than I expected. Gerald's anger boiled over. He slammed his fist against the table, rattling the silverware. You think you can just waltz in here and steal my company? I arched a brow, unbothered. I didn't steal anything, Gerald, I said simply. I bought it. Fair and square. Lucas shot up from his chair, his hands braced against the table as he glared at me. You used my sister to get close to us, he snarled. You played the long game. You manipulated her. I let out a dry laugh. Is that what you think? I leaned forward again, this time locking eyes with him. Tell me, Lucas, where were you when your father was making bad investment after bad investment? When employees were being laid off while you were off on your ski trips? When the company was bleeding money and no one was stepping in to fix it? Lucas hesitated, his lips pressing into a tight line. I turned to Camille next, my gaze unwavering. And you, I said quietly. 5 years, Camille. 5 years of watching your family treat me like an outsider. Like I was just some extra piece of furniture in your marriage. And now that I finally do something for myself, now I'm the villain. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. I let out a soft chuckle, shaking my head. You all had every opportunity to turn this company around. You didn't. So I did. Gerald's face was turning an impressive shade of red. You bastard, he spat. I just smiled, pushing my chair back as I stood. Don't worry, I said, straightening my suit jacket. You'll have plenty of time to process everything. After all, by tomorrow morning, the deal will be done. Camille took a step toward me, her voice barely above a whisper. Why? She asked, her eyes searching mine. Why do this? I studied her for a moment before speaking. 5 years ago, I offered to help. I had the expertise, the connections, the capital to save this business. And what did your mother say to me? Camille's throat bobbed as she swallowed. She knew the answer. I didn't wait for her to say it. Gold-digging sons-in-law should know their place, I recited coldly. Camille looked away. I exhaled, slipping my hands into my pockets. Well, I said, stepping past her. Now my place is at the head of your family's company. And with that, I walked out, leaving them to marinate in their downfall. Gerald's fingers trembled as he snatched the stack of documents from the table. His jaw clenched, his eyes darting over the pages with increasing panic, scanning for something. Anything that would disprove what Richard had just revealed. But there was no mistake. No loophole. No last-minute escape. This can't be right, Lorraine whispered, gripping the edge of the table like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Lucas leaned forward, his knuckles pressed against the polished mahogany surface, his face twisted in disbelief. You bought our company? His voice cracked slightly at the end, the weight of the realization crushing him. I shrugged, adjusting my cufflinks as if we were discussing something trivial, like the weather. Technically not yet. But as of today, Wolf Industries owns 48% of your stock. I came here to finalize the deal for the remaining 52%. Camille's chair screeched against the marble floor as she shot to her feet. Her hands were clenched at her sides, her nails digging into her palms. Anger blazed in her eyes, but underneath it, I saw something else, humiliation. Betrayal. You've been spying on us, she hissed. Using me? I met her glare with an expression of quiet amusement. No. Camille, I said, my voice calm and even. I've been protecting your employees from your family's incompetence. A sharp breath was sucked in somewhere at the table. Lorraine visibly recoiled, like the words had physically struck her. Lucas bristled, his hands balling into fists. Gerald's face darkened, his anger rolling off him in waves. Listen here, you son of a... Gerald began, his voice low and menacing. I cut him off. No, you listen. I stepped forward, my voice gaining an edge, my patience for their arrogance wearing thin. I sat at this table for years, listening to you all belittle me, treating me like I was nothing. I watched you make reckless decisions, ignoring every warning sign, every opportunity to fix what was broken. I offered to help. I had the knowledge, the connections, the capital. But what did you do? I turned my gaze to Lorraine. You scoffed at me. I looked at Lucas. You laughed at me. Then, finally, I looked at Camille. And you let them. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. Gerald slammed his fist on the table, his face red with fury. We'll fight this. We have lawyers. I sighed. Your lawyers, I said, work for the board now. Gerald froze. Richard, clearly enjoying the spectacle, took a slow sip of his drink, then leaned forward with an amused smirk. And as of today, he added, the board works for him. Lorraine clutched her pearls, eyes darting between me and Richard as realization dawned. The power they had held onto for decades had just slipped through their fingers. You can't do this, Lucas sputtered, his voice rising with desperation. You can't just come in and take everything we built. Oh, but I can, I said smoothly. And I already have. Lucas gritted his teeth, his nostrils flaring. You don't know the first thing about running our company. I let out a dry laugh. Your company? I echoed, shaking my head. You mean the company you've been running into the ground? The company that's been hemorrhaging money because of nepotistic hiring, outdated policies, and sheer incompetence. I leaned forward slightly. You weren't running a business, Lucas. You were running a legacy into the dirt. And I just saved it. Camille stepped between us, her voice quieter this time. But why? She looked up at me, searching for some flicker of the man she had married. Why go this far? I tilted my head, considering her question. 5 years ago, I had married into this family, thinking I was gaining something. A home, a partnership, a chance to be part of something bigger. But from the moment I had stepped into their world, I had been nothing more than an accessory. The outsider. The man they tolerated because Camille had chosen me. Every suggestion I had made was ignored. Every offer to help was brushed aside. And when the company had started to sink, they still refused to acknowledge that I could have been the one to save it. So I stopped asking for permission. I bought the company instead. I met Camille's gaze, letting her see the truth in my eyes. Because I was never going to be enough for your family, I said simply. No matter what I did. She flinched, but I didn't let the moment linger. I turned to Richard. Let's get the papers signed. I'd hate to keep the employees waiting. Richard gave me a knowing smile. Of course. He reached into his briefcase, pulling out the final documents. Gerald's chair scraped against the floor as he stood abruptly. We're not done, he growled. Yes, we are. I didn't even look at him. Richard handed me a pen, and I signed my name on the final page. With one stroke of ink, the last 52% of the company became mine. Camille's breath hitched audibly. Lucas looked like he was on the verge of throwing something. Lorraine pressed a hand to her chest like she was about to faint. Gerald just stared, his mouth slightly open, his whole body rigid with shock. I straightened, buttoning my suit jacket. Oh, and one more thing. I slid a single sheet of paper across the table toward Gerald. His hands shook as he picked it up, his eyes scanning the words. It was an offer. To stay on as a consultant. At half of his current salary. No decision-making power. No executive privileges. Just an employee. Gerald's face turned a shade of purple I didn't think was humanly possible. You think I'd ever work for you? He spat. I smirked. No. But I figured I'd be polite and offer. I turned to Lucas next, who was glaring at me with barely restrained fury. And as for you, I said, my tone mild, I'd clean out your office by the end of the week. There's no room for nepotism anymore. His jaw tightened, but he knew there was nothing he could do. Camille looked like she was about to be sick. I'll see myself out, I said casually, sliding my hands into my pockets as I walked toward the door. Richard followed, giving me an approving nod as we stepped into the hallway. That was brutal, he mused. But damn, was it satisfying. I exhaled slowly, rolling my shoulders back. They had it coming. He let out a low chuckle. So what's next, boss? I glanced over my shoulder, my gaze sweeping over the stunned, broken faces of the family that had spent years underestimating me. I smiled. Now, I said, my voice cool and unwavering. Now we rebuild. And with that, I walked away, leaving them to drown in the ruins of their own arrogance. The sound of my shoes echoed through the hallway as I walked away from the dining room, leaving Camille and her family to process what had just happened. The weight of 5 years of condescension, insults, and belittlement had finally been lifted from my shoulders. But I wasn't done. Not yet. The real work was about to begin. As I stepped into the boardroom on the top floor of the company's headquarters, a wave of satisfaction settled over me. The transition had already begun. The employees, the real backbone of this company, had been notified. The leadership restructuring was well underway. The board, once stacked with Camille's family's cronies, had been replaced by industry veterans who actually knew how to run a business. I glanced down at my watch. By now, the news would be breaking across financial channels. The story of how a so-called gold-digging son-in-law had taken over an entire corporate empire from the family who dismissed him would be making waves. Right on cue, my assistant, Monica, stepped into the room. Sir, the press is already outside. They want a statement. I nodded, adjusting the cuffs of my suit. Let them wait. She smirked, clearly enjoying the downfall of the arrogant elites just as much as I was. Also, Gerald just called. He's demanding an emergency meeting with the remaining shareholders. I let out a short chuckle. Of course he is. I had expected resistance. Gerald was the type of man who didn't go down without a fight. He'd spent decades at the top, making decisions with the confidence of someone who had never tasted real consequences. But today, he was learning the hard way that actions, especially ones born out of arrogance and incompetence, had consequences. I walked over to the large windows overlooking the city skyline. This was my view now. My company. My empire. The door swung open suddenly, and I didn't have to turn to know who it was. I'm not going to let you get away with this. Gerald's voice cut through the room, his fury barely contained. I turned slowly, meeting his glare head-on. You don't have a choice. He stalked toward me, his fists clenched. We'll fight this. We have lawyers. I sighed, shaking my head. Your lawyers, I said smoothly, work for the board now. And as of today, the board works for me. The color drained from his face. Lorraine and Lucas entered behind him, both looking as shell-shocked as if they had just been hit by a train. This isn't over, Lorraine said, her voice shaking. We built this company. We built this name. I tilted my head. No, your employees built this company. You were just the ones cashing the checks while running it into the ground. Lucas stepped forward, his face twisted with barely restrained fury. You're enjoying this, aren't you? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I walked to the conference table and picked up a folder, flipping it open before sliding a single sheet of paper toward Gerald. What's this? He demanded. A job offer, I said, barely able to contain my amusement. His nostrils flared as he picked up the document. Lorraine leaned over to read it, her lips parting in horror. You want my husband to work for you? She spat. I crossed my arms. Not as an executive, of course. That ship has sailed. But there's a consultant position open. Half his current salary, no decision-making power. Just an employee. Gerald's hands shook as he crumpled the paper and threw it at me. I would rather die than work for you. I smirked. That's what I thought. Lucas, still seething, leaned in. What do you even want from us? You won. You have the company. What more could you possibly take? I leaned forward, lowering my voice just enough to twist the knife deeper. I don't want anything else, Lucas. I just want you to understand how it feels to be on the outside looking in. His jaw tightened. I straightened. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a press conference to attend. As I turned to leave, Camille walked in. Unlike the rest of her family, she didn't look angry. She just looked lost. I paused. Camille. She swallowed hard. I need to talk to you. Her family glanced between us, but I didn't give them the satisfaction of watching whatever this conversation was about to be. Monica, I called. Please show them out. Monica, ever the professional, nodded and gestured toward the door. Gerald hesitated but eventually stormed out, Lorraine trailing behind him with sharp, clipped steps. Lucas glared at me one last time before following. When the door finally closed, Camille took a deep breath, stepping closer. I didn't know. I arched a brow. Didn't know what? That you were doing all of this, she said, motioning toward the office. That you were planning this. I studied her, trying to decide if I believed her. You never really paid attention, did you? She flinched, but I didn't hold back. For 5 years, I was nothing more than your husband, the one you dragged along to events, but never really included, I said. You stood by while your mother insulted me, while your father dismissed me, while your brother pretended I didn't exist. Her lips trembled. I didn't think it was that bad. I laughed under my breath, shaking my head. And that's the problem, Camille. You never thought. She took another step forward, reaching out, but I pulled back. I just need to know, she whispered. Did you ever love me? The question should have been easy to answer. But instead, I exhaled, running a hand down my face. I wanted to, I admitted. I really did. She swallowed. But love isn't just about wanting, I said quietly. It's about respect. And I realized a long time ago that you never really respected me. Tears welled in her eyes, but I had no sympathy left. Not anymore. I stepped past her, heading toward the door. The divorce papers will be on your desk by tomorrow morning. She turned sharply. Wait, divorce. I glanced over my shoulder. You didn't think I was staying, did you? Her face crumpled. I almost felt bad. Almost. But then I remembered all the years of silence. Of her watching me be humiliated and saying nothing. I turned away and walked out. The press conference awaited. And my new life was just beginning. The city skyline stretched out before me, a sea of steel and glass reflecting the golden hues of the setting sun. I stood at the window of my new office, the one Gerald had occupied for decades, watching as reporters and photographers crowded outside the building, their cameras flashing, their voices rising in an excited frenzy. The headlines had already hit the news. The son-in-law who took over, corporate coup rocks business world. Family dynasty overturned. How a dismissed husband took control. Every financial channel, every business blog, every major publication had jumped on the story. A month ago, Camille's family was preparing to finalize a major deal, sitting comfortably at the top of their empire, looking down on me as nothing more than an accessory to their daughter. Now, I own the empire, and they were the ones watching from the outside. The door to my office opened, and Monica stepped inside, holding a tablet. It's already trending. The stock jumped 14% in the last 3 hours. Employees are celebrating. There's been an internal memo from HR. Several key figures from the old board have resigned. I smirked. Let them. They're saying Lucas tried to rally shareholders this morning. She continued, amusement dancing in her eyes. Didn't go well for him. I chuckled. Of course it didn't. The shareholders were smart enough to follow results, not family loyalty. And results were exactly what I was delivering. The first thing I had done after taking over was cut the excess. Overpaid executives who had coasted by for years on their last names, unnecessary corporate spending that had drained the company's resources, outdated practices that had stalled progress. I had eliminated nepotism. I had installed leadership based on competence. I had implemented policies that actually benefited the employees, the real backbone of the company. And in just a matter of weeks, revenue had surged. Monica set the tablet down on my desk. Also, Gerald requested a meeting. I laughed under my breath. I bet he did. Should I tell him you're busy? I considered it for a moment, then shook my head. No, let him come. She smirked. This should be fun. It wasn't long before Gerald stormed into my office, the veins in his neck straining with fury. His tie was slightly loosened, his face red from anger or humiliation, probably both. I remained seated behind my desk, my expression cool and composed. Gerald, I greeted, motioning to the chair across from me. Have a seat. He didn't. You have no idea what you're doing, he spat, his hands slamming down on the desk. You think just because you pulled off some flashy takeover, you can run this company? You're a nobody compared to me. I arched a brow. A nobody? You don't have the experience. Gerald, I interrupted smoothly, folding my hands in front of me. Do you know how much the stock has gone up since I took over? He froze. 14%, I continued. In 3 hours. How much did it rise in the last 3 years under your leadership? He clenched his jaw, but didn't answer. That's what I thought. I leaned back in my chair, regarding him with quiet amusement. This isn't your company anymore, Gerald. And from where I'm sitting, it never really should have been. His nostrils flared. You think you're better than me? I think I proved I'm better than you. His hands curled into fists. You arrogant. Careful, I warned. You're in my office now. His nostrils flared, but he seemed to realize the truth of my words. The power dynamic had shifted. He wasn't the one giving orders anymore. I exhaled slowly, then picked up a folder and slid it toward him. What is this? He muttered. Your severance package, I replied. He stiffened. You're firing me? I smiled. Of course not, Gerald. That would require you to be employed here in the first place. His lips pressed into a thin line. You're going to regret this. I tilted my head. Am I? He turned sharply, his anger barely contained as he stormed toward the door. But just before leaving, he paused. You were nothing before Camille brought you into this family, he sneered. And without us, you'll be nothing again. I chuckled under my breath, shaking my head. That's where you're wrong, Gerald. He didn't respond. He just walked out, defeated. And just like that, the final remnants of his reign were gone. The new era begins. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Reporters swarmed the company headquarters daily, eager to dissect every move I made. Employees, once fearful of losing their jobs under Gerald's rule, now worked with a newfound sense of purpose. Lucas had tried, once again, to challenge my authority, only to be met with the cold realization that no one supported him. His position had never been earned, only handed to him. And as for Camille, she had been quiet. Too quiet. One night, I found her waiting outside my office. She looked different. The confidence, the smirk, the arrogance, it was gone. In its place was something else entirely. Regret. You didn't answer my calls, she said softly. I stepped past her, unlocking my car. I've been busy. She hesitated. I just wanted to talk. I leaned against the car door, crossing my arms. Talk about what? Her lips parted, but the words didn't come. I sighed. Let me guess. You had no idea how your family treated me all these years. You had no idea what I was going through. And now, you want to make things right. Her silence was answer enough. I exhaled, shaking my head. Camille, I don't hate you, but I also don't need you. Tears welled in her eyes. So that's it. We just end. I studied her, really studied her, and for the first time, I felt nothing. No love, no anger, just indifference. I moved my things out of the house, I said quietly. The divorce papers will be on your desk in the morning. She inhaled sharply, her hands trembling. I pushed off the car, stepping inside. As the engine rumbled to life, I glanced at her one last time. Take care, Camille. And then I drove away. She was just another chapter in my story. But I was just getting started. The divorce papers were delivered to Camille first thing in the morning. I didn't wait for a response, didn't expect one. She had already lost everything. Her family's company, their status, the wealth that had cushioned her from the real world. Now, she was losing me too. Not that she had ever really had me. The thing about Camille was that she had always been more concerned with appearances than reality. Our marriage had been a trophy for her, a box she checked off in her life plan. A successful, presentable husband? Check. A life free of financial struggle? Check. A family legacy that would always keep her secure? Check. Until I took it from her. Now, she had nothing but the wreckage of the life she thought she'd never lose. I sat in my office, reviewing the legal documents one last time before signing my name in smooth, deliberate strokes. That's it, I thought. Done. Monica, my assistant, entered with a raised brow as she glanced at the papers. That's one way to start a morning, she commented, setting my coffee on the desk. I smirked. Figured I'd finalize my independence before lunch. She chuckled, shaking her head. Camille called twice, by the way. Left messages. I took a sip of coffee. And she wants to talk. I scoffed, setting the cup down. Of course she does. She also mentioned the prenup, Monica added. I'm guessing she finally read the fine print. That made me laugh. I had signed the prenup years ago without argument, because I knew it would never work against me. Camille's mother had drafted it, eager to protect her daughter from a gold digger. She thought she was securing Camille's financial future, making sure I'd walk away with nothing if the marriage ended. But Lorraine, for all her scheming, had overlooked a crucial detail. A clause that voided the prenup if Camille publicly disparaged me. And since the takeover, that's all she had been doing. News articles, family rants, her own press statements, every single one of them laced with insults, painting me as some manipulative villain who had preyed on their family. She had effectively voided her own prenup. Now, she owed me money. Monica grinned as she watched realization settle over me again. I take it you're not in the mood for a reconciliation chat. I exhaled, pushing the papers aside. Tell her I'm busy. Monica raised a brow. For how long? I smirked. Indefinitely. She chuckled, turning to leave, but paused at the door. Oh, and your lawyer called. Camille's also trying to dispute the property split. Apparently, she doesn't like the idea of losing the penthouse. I tilted my head. The penthouse I bought. The very one. I shook my head, amused. Camille had spent years treating me like I was an afterthought in her world. Now, she wanted to fight for the luxury that had only been possible because of me. Tell my lawyer to move forward with the property transfer, I said. She can keep the car. I'll take the house. Monica gave me a knowing smile. Cold. I leaned back in my chair. Just fair. The final meeting. A few days later, Camille requested a meeting. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a high-end restaurant, one we used to frequent when things were still new, when I still thought our marriage was built on something real. She arrived looking polished as ever, her designer dress perfectly fitted, her makeup flawless. But I saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the cracks in her confidence. She was losing control of everything, and she knew it. I didn't stand when she approached the table. Didn't offer to pull out her chair. Those days were long gone. She sat across from me, fingers tightening around the stem of her wine glass. So, she said, her voice carefully composed, this is really happening. I took a sip of water. It was always going to happen, Camille. She exhaled sharply, shaking her head. You could have talked to me. You could have told me what you were planning. I set my glass down, meeting her gaze without hesitation. Would you have listened? She swallowed hard, but didn't respond. That was the problem. She wouldn't have. She had never taken me seriously, never considered me an equal in this marriage. I had been convenient, acceptable, useful, until I wasn't. I want to keep the penthouse, she said abruptly. I almost laughed. You want to keep my penthouse? She flinched, but didn't back down. It's my home. No, Camille. It was ours. And now it's mine. Her lips pressed together. You don't need it. I tilted my head, studying her. And you do? She hesitated, then sighed. I just didn't think we'd end up like this. I leaned forward slightly, my voice quieter. You didn't think at all. Tears pricked at the edges of her eyes, but I didn't feel sympathy. Not anymore. She had let this happen. She had allowed her family to tear me down for years. And now, she was facing the consequences of that. I don't hate you, Camille, I said finally. But I'm done with you. She inhaled sharply. I stood, tossing a few bills onto the table. Enjoy the rest of your evening. And then I walked away, leaving her sitting there, her world crumbling around her. The official announcement. A week later, the final papers were signed. The divorce was finalized. Camille tried to put on a brave face for the press, spinning her own version of events. But the world wasn't buying it. The headline read, "He walked away with everything, including his dignity." My company was thriving. My reputation was stronger than ever. And Camille? She had faded into the background, a woman once surrounded by power, now grasping at the remnants of her former life. It was over, and I had won. One evening, I sat in my penthouse, a glass of whiskey in hand, watching the city lights flicker below. Monica sent me a message. Officially CEO, officially divorced, officially free. How does it feel? I smirked, typing back. Like justice served cold. And with that, I closed the chapter on Camille, her family, and everything they had once been. This was my life now, and I was just getting started. I stood on the balcony of my penthouse, a glass of whiskey in my hand, watching the city lights stretch far beyond the horizon. The air was crisp, carrying the distant hum of traffic, a lullaby of the empire I now controlled. It had been weeks since the divorce was finalized. The media storm had died down, though whispers of Camille's downfall still lingered in business circles. She had retreated from public view, forced to adjust to a life she never imagined, one without privilege, without status, without me. And me? I had never been better. My company was thriving. Investors had more confidence in Wolf Industries than ever before. The revenue had skyrocketed by 30% in the last quarter alone, a number that sent shockwaves through the corporate world. The same people who once dismissed me as Camille's husband now sought my time, my insight, my approval. It was almost poetic. My phone buzzed on the table beside me. Monica, stock's up another 5%. You're officially richer than Lucas ever was. You should celebrate. I smirked, taking another sip of whiskey before typing back. Me already am. Monica, you're not even remotely shocked, are you? Me, should I be? A few seconds later, another message appeared. Monica, speaking of Lucas, I have something interesting you might want to see. I raised an eyebrow. Me, send it over. A notification popped up. A forwarded article from a financial news site. I clicked it, my curiosity piqued. Disgraced heir falls from grace. Lucas Grayson declares bankruptcy. I let out a low chuckle as I skimmed the article. Apparently, Lucas had attempted to start his own company in a desperate bid to prove he could succeed without his family's legacy. He had poured what little personal wealth he had left into the venture, securing loans, making risky investments. And then, the inevitable happened. Bad decisions, poor financial management. And now, he was finished. The once proud heir to his father's company was bankrupt, drowning in debt, his reputation shattered beyond repair. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. It was only a matter of time. Lucas had never been a leader. He had only been born into the illusion of one. Now, stripped of the family name, the protection, the influence, he had been exposed for what he truly was. Nothing. I set my glass down and replied to Monica. Me, karma works fast, doesn't it? Monica, almost as fast as you. Me, almost. I locked my phone, setting it aside as I stared out into the city once more. Everything I had built, everything I had fought for, had led to this moment. I had stepped into the battlefield they thought they owned, and I had walked away victorious. But the best part? I wasn't even close to being done. The unexpected visitor. A week later, I was sitting in my office when Monica walked in, her expression unreadable. You have a visitor, she said. I barely looked up from my laptop. If it's another reporter, tell them I'm not interested. It's not a reporter, she said carefully. There was something in her voice that made me pause. I lifted my gaze. Who is it? She hesitated before answering. Camille. I blinked. Then, slowly, I leaned back in my chair, studying Monica's expression for any signs that she was joking. She wasn't. I exhaled, glancing at my watch. How does she look? Monica tilted her head. Like she's lost everything. I wasn't surprised. Sighing, I waved a hand toward the door. Send her in. Monica nodded and stepped out. Moments later, Camille entered. She looked different. The arrogance that once defined her was gone. The perfectly curated appearance, the designer clothes, the confidence, the poise had faded. Her dress was still expensive, but it didn't carry the same weight as before. There were faint shadows beneath her eyes, the kind that came from sleepless nights and worry. She hesitated for a brief moment before sitting across from me. For the first time in years, I saw something I had never seen in Camille before. Uncertainty. I folded my hands on the desk. What do you want, Camille? She swallowed, her eyes flickering down to my hands before meeting my gaze. I just wanted to talk. I arched a brow. About. She exhaled, shaking her head slightly. Everything. I remained silent, waiting. After a moment, she leaned forward slightly, her voice quieter. I made a mistake. I tilted my head. Which one? Her lips pressed together. All of them. There it was. The admission. The realization that everything she had taken for granted had crumbled beneath her. That I had been the foundation holding her world together, and she had never realized it until it was gone. I leaned back, crossing my arms. Why are you here, Camille? Her eyes searched mine. I don't know. A small smirk tugged at the corner of my lips. That's a first. She let out a soft, humorless laugh. I guess I deserved that. I didn't respond. Because she did. Silence stretched between us, heavy and unspoken words lingering in the air. Finally, she exhaled sharply. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I studied her, searching for any signs of manipulation, any trace of the woman who had once stood by and let her family tear me down. But all I saw was regret. Regret and emptiness. I nodded once. Apology accepted. Surprise flickered in her eyes. Just like that. I shrugged. What do you want me to say? That I still hate you? That I want revenge? She swallowed. Do you? I sighed, shaking my head. No, Camille. I don't. Because I had already won. She hesitated, then glanced toward the window, the city skyline reflecting in her eyes. Do you ever think about what could have been? I let out a dry chuckle. No. She flinched. I leaned forward, my voice calm. There was never a what could have been, Camille. There was only what was. And what was never enough. Her breath hitched, but she nodded slowly. I should go, she whispered. I didn't stop her. She stood, lingering for a moment before finally walking to the door. She paused. Goodbye. I nodded. Goodbye, Camille. And then she was gone. I let out a slow breath, rubbing my temple as I turned back to my work. The past was done. The future? That belonged to me now. The week after Camille's visit, life moved on without pause. Business meetings, stock evaluations, expansion plans. Everything was falling into place, just as I had designed. Wolf Industries had not only stabilized but was thriving under my leadership. Investors were flooding in, employees were more motivated than ever, and the media had shifted from scandal to success story. I had everything I had fought for, and yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Not regret, never that. More like the realization that, for the first time in years, I wasn't just proving a point anymore. I had won. Now, I had to decide what came next. I was still mulling over this thought when Monica walked into my office, carrying a folder and an amused smirk. You'll never guess who just walked in for a job interview, she said, setting the folder down in front of me. I raised a brow. I assume you're telling me because I'll actually care. Monica chuckled. Oh, you'll care. She leaned on the desk, watching me as I opened the folder. I flipped through the first few pages, scanning the name at the top. Monica Reynolds. The name didn't register at first, but then I saw the resume. Harvard MBA. 10 years of experience in corporate strategy. Former vice president of operations at Grayson Enterprises. And just like that, I remembered. Monica Reynolds. The woman Camille's mother had wanted her to marry. I glanced up, intrigued. You're kidding. Monica grinned. Wish I was. Of all the people to walk into my company, seeking employment under my leadership, it had to be her. Camille's family had always idolized Monica. She was the daughter of one of their wealthiest business partners, perfectly polished, well-connected, and accomplished. Lorraine had sung her praises for years, often comparing her to Camille, hinting that she would have been the better choice. I remembered meeting her at a few social events when Camille and I were still together. She had always been polite but distant, seemingly indifferent to the dynamics of my marriage. And now, She was sitting in my company's waiting area, applying for a management position. I leaned back, rubbing my chin. Did she know this was my company when she applied? Monica shrugged. Doubtful. She probably assumed it was still controlled by Camille's family. Her face was priceless when she realized who would be conducting the interview. I chuckled under my breath. This should be interesting. Monica smirked. So? Want me to send her in? I nodded. Let's see what she has to say. Monica left the office, and a few moments later, the door opened again. Monica Reynolds stepped inside. She was just as poised as I remembered, tall, elegant, with a sharp gaze that missed nothing. Dressed in a navy blue business suit, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had spent years at the top of the corporate world. But there was something else in her expression. A flicker of unease, perhaps even regret. She had expected this meeting to go differently. Mr. Wolf, she said smoothly, extending a hand. Thank you for taking the time. I shook her hand, watching her carefully. Please, have a seat. She sat across from me, crossing her legs neatly. I picked up her resume, flipping through it again. Impressive credentials. I worked hard for them. Her tone was neutral, but there was an edge of pride there. I closed the folder and leaned forward slightly. Why are you here, Monica? Her eyes flickered, as if weighing how honest she wanted to be. Finally, she sighed. You already know. After the takeover, I lost my position at Grayson Enterprises. When the company crumbled, I had two choices: leave the country or rebuild here. And you chose here. I chose stability, she corrected. Your company is stable. More than that, it's growing. I studied her, my fingers tapping lightly against the desk. You know, Camille's mother used to talk about you all the time. A flicker of something crossed her face, but she quickly masked it. I'm aware. She thought you would have been a better match for Camille than me. Monica exhaled softly. Lorraine had a lot of opinions. I smirked. And yet, here we are. I run the company, and you're the one asking for a job. Her lips twitched in amusement. Ironic, isn't it? I leaned back, considering her. I have to admit, I'm curious. What did you think of me back then? She didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was softer. I thought you were underestimated, she admitted. I thought they treated you like an accessory, not a person. That surprised me. And yet, you never said anything. Monica sighed. It wasn't my place. And honestly, back then, I didn't think you wanted an ally. I frowned slightly. And now? She met my gaze head on. Now I do. Silence stretched between us. Monica Reynolds had been raised in the same world as Camille, yet she had fought her way up, made a name for herself on her own terms. And now, she was standing at the edge of a new beginning, one where I held the power to decide if she got another chance. Finally, I picked up a pen and tapped it against her resume. You know what the hardest part of success is? She tilted her head slightly. What? I leaned forward, lowering my voice just enough to make sure she really heard it. Remembering to give others the chance you wish someone had given you. She inhaled, considering that. Then, slowly, she nodded. I slid her resume back toward her. Welcome to Wolf Industries, Monica. A genuine smile spread across her lips. Thank you, Mr. Wolf. I smirked. Call me. I paused, reconsidering. Actually, no. Call me boss. She chuckled, standing. Understood. As she walked out, I exhaled, tapping my fingers on the desk. The past had finally burned away, and from its ashes, a new empire was rising, one that I owned. And this was only the beginning. The weeks following Monica's hiring passed in a blur of efficiency, strategy, and expansion. She was as sharp as I remembered, perhaps even sharper now that she had something to prove. Under my leadership, Wolf Industries had not only stabilized, but was climbing new heights. The employees had adjusted to the change faster than expected. Those who had benefited from Camille's family's nepotism were either gone or had learned to keep their heads down. The ones who had always been the real backbone of the company, the ones who had worked tirelessly while the Grayson family took all the credit, were thriving. For the first time in years, the company was running on merit, not entitlement. And then, one afternoon, a message popped up on my phone. Camille is getting married. I stared at the text, sent by Monica, before leaning back in my chair with a slow exhale. I shouldn't have been surprised. Camille had always been the kind of person who needed an anchor. She had never learned how to stand on her own. She had gone from her family's empire to my stability, and now, with both gone, she was reaching for someone new. Still, I couldn't help but wonder. Who would she choose this time? I glanced at Monica's follow-up message. His name is Oliver. Real estate agent. Not in our industry. No real power. Just average. I smirked. That made sense. She had gone from her family's world to mine. This time, she had chosen something safe. Someone who wouldn't overshadow her. Someone who wouldn't pull the rug from beneath her feet. A few days later, a wedding invitation arrived at my office. It was white, embossed with gold lettering. Elegant, classic, just like Camille always preferred. I ran my fingers over the raised letters. Mr. and Mrs. Oliver Hastings request the pleasure of your company. I let out a quiet chuckle. She hadn't even waited a full year after our divorce. Monica leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. So? You going? I raised a brow. Do I look like a man who attends ex-wife weddings? She snorted. Not really, but I think you should. I tilted my head, intrigued. And why is that? Her lips curled into a smirk. Because showing up in a tailored suit, at the height of your success, completely unbothered, that would be the final blow. I considered that. For years, I had been underestimated, looked down upon, dismissed. Camille's family had treated me like an afterthought. And now, I was at the top, and they were nowhere near me. Perhaps Monica was right. Perhaps I should go. The wedding day. The venue was as extravagant as I expected. A massive estate, dripping in chandeliers, flowers, and luxury. I arrived precisely 20 minutes late. Not late enough to be rude, but just enough to ensure my entrance was noticed. Heads turned as I walked in, my tailored suit fitting perfectly, my presence undeniable. I spotted Gerald and Lorraine near the champagne bar. They saw me, and Lorraine immediately stiffened, her grip tightening on her flute of champagne. I gave her a polite nod. Gerald, red-faced and clearly already a few drinks in, glared but said nothing. He knew better. Lucas was nowhere in sight, probably still licking his wounds from his failed business attempts. And then, of course, there was Camille. She looked exactly as she always had, poised, polished, perfect. But there was something different about her. Something missing. The effortless confidence. The untouchable arrogance. She had been humbled. Her eyes widened when she saw me, flickering with surprise, then something else. A flash of uncertainty. I let a small smirk tug at my lips as I made my way to the bar. The whispers had already started. I can't believe he showed up. Does he look better than before? He owns an empire now. Did you hear? I ordered a whiskey and took a slow sip, my expression unreadable. Camille hesitated before making her way toward me, her dress trailing behind her like she was still the center of attention. Didn't expect to see you here, she said, her voice smooth but unsure. I turned slightly, meeting her gaze. Didn't expect an invitation. She inhaled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. I thought it would be polite. I hummed. Polite. A small frown formed between her brows. You didn't have to come. I took another sip of whiskey. I know. Her lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to say more, but then someone called her name. Oliver. He was exactly what I expected. Handsome in a safe, non-threatening way. The kind of man who wouldn't challenge her, who wouldn't demand more from her than she was willing to give. His eyes flicked between us, polite but wary. Hey, babe. Everything okay? Babe. I almost laughed. Camille forced a smile. Yes, of course. Oliver, this is. I know who he is. Oliver interrupted, his voice tight. Good. I smiled, offering a handshake. Nice to meet you. He hesitated before shaking my hand. His grip was firm, but his confidence wasn't. Camille shifted uncomfortably. Well, we should be getting back. Thank you for coming. I nodded, stepping aside. Of course. Congratulations. She hesitated, her eyes searching mine for something. Regret? Nostalgia? I didn't know, and I didn't care. As they walked away, Monica appeared at my side, swirling a glass of wine. That was fun. I chuckled. It was. She leaned in slightly. Did you see her face when she saw you? I smirked. Saw it. Enjoyed it. Monica laughed, shaking her head. You're terrible. I downed the last of my whiskey and set the glass down. Come on. Let's get out of here. She raised a brow. Already. I shrugged. I've made my point. And I had. Camille had chosen her path. I had chosen mine. And for the first time in years, I felt free. As we walked out, I handed a small, wrapped box to one of the waiters. Make sure the bride gets this, I said. He nodded, and we left. Inside the box was a single coffee maker. With a note. Some people serve coffee. Others build empires. Congratulations on your wedding. Best wishes, your ex-CEO. As I stepped into my car, I couldn't help but smile. The best revenge? Living well.